Biochar is a stable form of carbon created by heating organic material in a low oxygen environment, a process called pyrolysis. Think of it like charcoal, but designed for soil. It creates tiny pores to hold water, nutrients, and microbes, helping your soil perform better long-term. A better chance at surviving dry spells or fighting against water restrictions when you're not allowed to water. How does biochar help your soil? Biochar increases water holding capacity, retains nutrients, and increases microbial activity within your soil, making your soil more robust, long-term, and healthier. Does biochar really hold water? 100% it absolutely does. That is one thing I will absolutely hang my hat on, is biochar does hold water. Several times its weight, in fact. You can compare it to anything you have in your home, sponges, whatever. Compare it when you get it. Biochar does hold water, I guarantee it. How much? That depends on the quality of the biochar. Any good biochar should have at least 300 square meters per gram of biochar. Okay, so the extreme surface area. You might have some biochars that reach over 500 or 800 square meters per gram. You're getting closer to activated charcoal at that point. Biochar's porous structure traps water and releases it slowly. During a rain event, or while you water your plants, instead of just running past the rooting depths of your plants, the biochar does the heavy work quickly and absorbs that water like a sponge, so that your plants can slowly absorb that water from the biochar long term. Biochar does both. It absorbs water like a sponge, but it chemically bonds to nutrients like NP and K, which you always spend money on in fertilizers. But instead of washing that away, biochar retains that water and chemically bonds to the nutrients, making it a slow release for your plants. And luckily, your plants have a stronger affinity and can take the nutrients from your biochar. Biochar just holds it quickly, so your plants can draw on it like a bank account, nice and slowly. All right, now how to charge biochar properly. I'm getting this question all the time, and it's kind of an ongoing thing where people are like, oh, can I charge it with this? Can I charge it with that? You can charge it with anything. Biochar will absorb pretty much anything physically and chemically, but to keep it simple, biochar absorbs liquids the best. So if you have any type of fertilizer, compost, manure, if you add water and make it a little bit more like a tea and add that to your biochar, the biochar is going to absorb that much faster than if you had a dry fertilizer and try to mix it with the biochar. The biochar just doesn't absorb it quite the same. Biochar also absorbs gases. So if you take biochar and you put it on top of your compost or mix it into your compost or your manure from your chicken coop, the gases that are being released from that compost manure are going to be trapped by the biochar. Biochar has a high CEC, or cation exchange capacity. It's kind of like a magnet for nutrients, solids, liquids, and gases. So how much to charge your biochar, how to charge it, it kind of depends on what you're wanting to charge it with, but it's hard to mess up, really. If you have your fertilizer, compost, or manure, you add about 10% biochar to that mixture and let it do its job. The biochar will retain that nutrients that's in your compost manure and then take that and apply it to your soil. Now, further on the charging process, there are some companies out there that sell charged biochar. However, like I said, you only use 10% biochar when charging it with a compost or manure. So when you buy charged biochar, in most cases, you're only getting 10% biochar and the rest is compost or manure of some sort. So what we sell is a concentrated biochar so that you can have flexibility in charging it and using it across all different disciplines, whether it's with your vegetables or your flowers or your lawn. You can charge it with anything. In some cases, you might add raw biochar in the fall so that it retains the nutrients of decomposition within your garden throughout the fall. So in some cases, you might want raw biochar and not charged biochar. Or maybe you have a toxic soil and you want to add biochar to actually absorb and take toxins out of your soil. So there's different applications, and our product is very dynamic, and you're going to use it anywhere you can imagine. How much biochar should you use? This is a great question. Typically, you want to be about 10% biochar to compost or manure, all right? A solid fertilizer. If you have a liquid fertilizer concentrate, which is water soluble, follow the instructions on the fertilizer package of diluting with water, and then add enough water to your biochar so that it soaks up that water and that fertilizer enough that you can pick it up and squeeze really tight and have a couple drips come out of your hand. Then you know it's nice and saturated and it's soaking up enough. You might find that you might have to add a little bit more. I would let that charge with a liquid fertilizer for maybe 2-3 days. If you're adding it to a solid fertilizer like compost or manure, I would leave it for a week or so at least. Adding water, again, allows the biochar to soak that up. But in terms of how much biochar to add, again, about 10% or 9 parts compost manure to 1 part biochar. Mix it all together, hit it with some water so the biochar can soak up those nutrients, and then top dress it to your soil. Is biochar good for all soil types? Yes, and let me explain why. In a sandy soil, you're going to have a low cation exchange capacity, or CEC, which means nutrients just leaches or flows right through your sand. Biochar tightens those little pores up so that those nutrients actually get locked into the soil rather than running away with the water. Now, if you have a clay soil, which is very common around here, your soil will become like concrete or cement in hot summer. But by adding biochar, you're going to open up the pores of that clay, allowing filtration of not just water, but also oxygen, which is going to help with compaction. So biochar shines in both clay and sandy soils. Now, if you have a very rich soil and you're boasting that you don't need biochar, biochar will still help with leaching and water retention, regardless. How long does biochar last in soil? Our biochar is made from wood. Raw wood would decompose quite quickly and is good for your soil. But biochar, in going through the pyrolysis process, changes chemically so that it actually doesn't decompose. It stays in the soil for hundreds, if not thousands of years, retaining water and retaining nutrients from other organic material like raw wood chips. Does biochar improve plant growth? Yes, it does. Biochar simply does what it's designed to do, and that's retain water and retain nutrients. If you're giving it water and you're giving it nutrients, the biochar will retain it so your plants do better, period. Is biochar the same as charcoal? Not exactly. Charcoal can be made out of anything. Diapers, tires, wood, plastic, anything can be made into charcoal. However, biochar specifically must be made of something organic, such as wood or grass or manure. Biochar is also designed specifically for a soil amendment and designed with a high surface area to retain water and retain nutrients with a positive affinity or attraction to things like NPK. Now, can biochar reduce fertilizer use? Yeah, it can. It ultimately increases the efficiency and the residence time of your fertilizer. So if you apply a fertilizer on top of biochar or with biochar, biochar is going to retain it longer, so your plants have longer access to it. You may not now have to keep adding fertilizer throughout the year, or maybe in less increments, because the fertilizer you did add is still there and the excess fertilizer isn't wasted. And I think that's where the main payout is that you're not wasting fertilizer that goes elsewhere or goes past the roots. Biochar will retain much more of that, keeping it right where it needs to be for your plants. Now, the next time you go to get your favorite fertilizer for any type of use, be sure to grab a bucket of biochar to go with it so you can take full advantage of your investment of fertilizer. Now, is biochar good for the environment? Absolutely is. Whether you believe in climate change or not, doesn't really matter. Biochar does what it's designed to do, and that's retain water, retain nutrients. So if we're cut down on how much water we can use, biochar is going to help us out there. Less water use, less fertilizer use. And biochar is made out of pure carbon. Instead of carbon being released back into the atmosphere through burning or decomposition, the pyrolysis process traps that carbon and retains it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So it literally takes carbon from the atmosphere and locks it away. So it's climate change in reverse. What's the biggest mistake people make with biochar? They're looking for something good for their soil because their soil is not performing. Maybe it's lacking nutrients or water, and then they put something that looks good into their soil. And in this case, maybe they use biochar. If they don't charge it ahead of time, you will find a negative effect. And why? Because the biochar is a sponge. If you're lacking water and nutrients in your soil already, biochar is going to absorb that from your soil, acting kind of like a weed. You must charge it first to get the best results. Unless you have a very specific application where you're going to apply raw biochar, I'd highly recommend charge your biochar first and put it in your soil. And again, our biochar is concentrated so that you can apply whatever type of fertilizer, compost, manure you want to it based on what you're trying to grow. If you're growing a blueberry, it's very different than if you're growing tomatoes or pumpkins.